Mayor Pro Tem Woodruff,
Here.
Councilor Buell, Mayor Yasi. Here. Councilor Koso,
Here.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Present.
The next item on the agenda, Mayor, is reading of the Indigenous Land Acknowledgement.
This is a call to honor and respect Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination. As residents and visitors of Durango, we are called upon to educate ourselves about the history and cultural heritage of the land we inhabit. The city of Durango is situated on the ancestral homelands and territories of the Nuchu, Ute, Jicarilla Apache, Pueblos of New Mexico, Hopi-Sinom, Hopi, and Dene Navajo nations. The original stewards of this land were forcibly removed and exposed to countless atrocities by the United States government, including repeatedly broken treaties, forced assimilation, the tragic legacy of Indian boarding schools, and the loss of ancestral homelands. We recognize lasting generational trauma exists within Native communities today. We affirm the continuing importance of ancestral sites to descendant communities as integral to the living cultural landscape. This acknowledgement only becomes meaningful when combined with accountable relationships and informed actions. May this serve as a step toward inclusion and reconciliation.
The next item on the agenda, Mayor, is grant update and Durango Creative District quarterly update.
Mayor and Council, Tommy Crosby, Economic Opportunity Manager with the Prosperity Office. I'm here today to provide a brief update on 2 Renew grants that are on the consent agenda at tonight's regular meeting. We find that the Renew grant continues to align with the city's mission and values as well as the Prosperity Office mission. Hopefully you're used to kind of the cadence at which we present these grants at this point. Today, the main focus is the city's Renew grant. As a refresher, the Renew grant is a dollar-for-dollar matching grant that the city offers for any public-facing property improvement. There are 2 Renew grants on tonight's agenda. Both Renew grant, they're requesting the maximum dollar amount, $5,000. So as a reminder, this is a matching grant. For every dollar the business puts in, the city will match that up to $5,000. There's $36,000 remaining in the 2025 Renew Grant Fund. This would deplete that by $10,000, leaving $26,000 for the remainder of 2025. Happy to answer any questions about the 2 applicants on tonight's agenda, but just wanted to make sure you got the heads up that we'll have 2 Renew grants on tonight's consent agenda.
Mayor, quick question. Tommy, just a question on if we have excess budget, does it roll to the next year? How is excess budget treated at the end of the year?
Good question. The Renew grant is funded out of the Economic Opportunity budget, which comes from general fund, so that we budget for the Renew grant year over year, but it doesn't necessarily roll over. Our goal, we've kind of been putting the press on with getting the word out on Renew grant. It sounds like we have 1, potentially 2 additional Renew grants that would request funding before the end of 25, which would likely leave us with a fund balance that would just go back into the general fund.
And then a deadline for the last applications to get in?
We try to not have applicants submit after November 1st, just due to the fact that they need the project completed and reimbursed by the end of the city's fiscal year. So you tend to see the deadline around November, a little bit of flexibility depending on city council dates in relation to November 1st. Great. With that, I'm going to hand it over to the Durango Creative District Executive Director, Catherine Wagner.
Hi, Mayor and Council. So good to see you all. Our creative scene is certainly on fire, and the Creative District is very, very busy trying to connect silos and emphasize how art's impact is far beyond aesthetics. I'm going to, how do I go back? I'm going to lead with the Public Art Master Plan. This is a project we've been working on really heavily in Q3 and Q4 of this year. We're anticipating completion in November of this year. Our original Public Art Master Plan that the city is using right now is a simple PDF from 2015. It documents 37 sculptures and a series of potential locations. We've done 8 scouting missions so far, and we're using GIS technology to get really specific latitude and longitude, and have already recorded over 130 pieces of public art, including both sculptures and murals, and a bunch of work that has been increased since lodger's tax was launched in 2022. So our goal is to create an interactive living document that is actually functional. So we're creating a map and working with the Public Art Archive. On this slide, you can see we have some of the GIS locations that are color-coded by sculpture or mural or installation. We're going to be ultimately uploading all this data into the Public Art Archive, which is an online platform used by a lot of cities throughout the world. Reno, Nevada, as an example, has a really phenomenal archive. So everything will be digitized, and through that next year, we'll be able to create way more engagement platforms. So different tours, like a tour along the Animas River Trail or something related to historic content. And we're really going to be focusing on different levels of engagement. Our public art master plan that we're creating will also be accompanied by a narrative that will act as a guide in terms of priorities, emphasizing certain areas where there may be more urban blight and opportunities to create more directed pathways for lodger's tax public art funding, so we can have a more curated approach. So we'll still take, applications and ideas as to, different spots here and there, but we're really hoping that we can use this to direct attention towards areas and have a little more of a curated approach to how our public art expands. Any questions on public art? I'm just going to pop them in really quickly. Feel free to ask at the end. In other big news, the Creative District recently opened a new location. We now have a Main Avenue front at 1135 Main Avenue, which is also a community gallery. Here's a quick image of our grand opening, which was in July. We had a portrait lotto that featured 38 artists who did not necessarily know one another, and we had over 200 people in attendance. This space is really phenomenal for the Creative District because it allows us to be a physical hub for grant information sessions, for programs that are complementing lodger's tax programs. Here's an example of an Arts and Society information session that we had. This program is run through Redline Contemporary in Denver. Previously, there had not been any awardees from La Plata County, but we've been bringing in a lot of our front range connections that we've made through the Creative District program to enhance grant opportunities from the front range and bring them here to La Plata County. This is an example of one last year, Magic City Podcast, which was formed through the lodger's tax program, was the only recipient from La Plata County for $30,000. So this space not only allows us to complement all these amazing things and nonprofits and programs that are happening, but also gives us that, a hub as a resource center. Another way that we're leveraging some of our Creative District connections is through state level tax credit programs. I know Powerhouse has been, and I'm sure many of you are aware, received a $1 million credit, and that was through connections that were forged through the Creative District and our relationship with CCI. More on the Lodger's Tax Arts and Culture Fund. The Creative District is really the boots on the ground. We spent 106 hours in Q3 alone working with LTAC recipients and programs to brainstorm ways that they can collaborate even further. Here we've got an example of the Superpowered Sovereignty Indigenous Comic Book Art Exhibition, which we're housing at our gallery and is a complement to November's Title VI Liaisons Indigenous Celebration for Indigenous History Month. So we created that program as a complement, and then also Maria's Literary Foundation is a little trifecta partner in that they're going to be showing a lot of comic books, and we're bringing in a lot of the original illustrators. Here we also have the mural by Brad Goodall on the Smiley building. So that was also funded through Lodger's Tax, and in order to really emphasize its impact on the community, they held a ribbon cutting and a celebration on the first Friday in August. So we're using our First Fridays platform to further complement all these other programs that are getting funded through this phenomenal tax resource. Durango Creates grants, we facilitate that grant. It does come from the Lodger's Tax platform. These are $5,000 and less. This happened in July of this year, round 2. We're seeing a huge increase in demand. So this year we had 17 applicants requesting close to $70,000 with only a little over 18,000 distributes. So it really shows the appetite. Other main things that we're working on are public art calls related to the city. I know a lot of you were at the ribbon cutting for the La Plata Airport's first phase. We're going to be working with Tony Vicari on phase 2. We took over First Friday's Art Walks solely as the sole entity in implementing it in June. So we've rebranded and we're working with the city to, and also Visit Durango, to develop really strong metrics tracking. We're also raising funds to provide micro grants to incentivize non-traditional businesses to pay for artists or musicians or artist demonstrations and really amplify that program as a showcase for our community that can be publicized regionally and really solidify Durango as a cultural hub and bring in those resources and visitors to our community and celebrate that. We've seen regular participation go up from 8 to 13 in terms of businesses, but we're really hoping to amplify that much more towards more of the 30 mark moving forward. And just one last note, a big effort that we've been working on is regional collaboration. So we got together with Ridgway's Creative District and we're establishing the first ever Western Slope Creative District convening. We've seen with Lodgers Tax and with all of our entrepreneurs in the community, there's only so much that Durango can provide. So we're working with 12 other creative districts that are listed here all throughout the Western Slope. We're going to get together this Thursday and Friday for our first summit in Ridgway. And we're also going to welcome some folks from Colorado Creative Industries on the state level to entertain ways that we can create more exchange programs to expand our economy more regionally rather than just focused on Durango. And CCI, their director, Josh Blanchard, came and visited a few weeks ago, and he said that he was so thrilled with this approach that CCI on the state level is actually going to replicate this for the entire state and encourage more regional collaboration. So it's really exciting to sort of lead and be the spearheaders of those regional collaborations.
Catherine, thank you. And thanks for bringing all the energy that you have, Ben. I've got a question and then a comment.
Sure.
First, the question in the master plan or the inventory, are we also talking about the quality of the artwork, how degradation, need of repair, those kind of pieces?
Yeah, we are taking notes on if there's any situation where there's paint chipping. A lot of the murals that we have at the moment, there have been a few that were restored in the past few years, but we are making those maintenance notes as well. So we can provide that to the city. Tommy's department does have a fund that's geared towards maintenance, so we're trying to supplement those efforts also.
Perfect, thank you. And then just a comment, took the opportunity to come down on October 3rd, and council, if you didn't know, they did a great presentation for the Cottonwood Nursing Home residents. You walk in there, if anybody has had a family member or a friend that's been in a nursing home, that was an incredible exposition to show the artwork that the nursing home residents had been doing. I for the first time in my life, I had seen 7 or 8 wheelchair residents who were dressed up in their finest and sharing their personal stories and their artwork.
We had the senior prom theme, so they were really excited to dress up.
It was really incredible to see. And so there is a long distance high five to you, Tommy, to your team as well. That was an incredible moment. And again, really what we'd love to do is the residents that don't necessarily see city council and activities and those kind of things, I think they really got a spotlight shine on them that night. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the great things about being this boots on the ground organization is we really get to have those deep conversations and acknowledge who is applying for things, who's not, where the gaps are. And so that's a great opportunity to showcase them.
Well done.
Thank you.
For your presentation. Regarding some of the sculptures and the murals, can they be relocated?
That would be a conversation that I would definitely want to have with the city, because I'm sure it depends on if they're on private or public property. We are noting if they are private or public, or if they're funded through lodgers tax. But that would be, I'm sure, a very case-by-case situation. If they're on Parks and Rec, or how the base is, or but I do think that in a lot of circumstances, sculptures can be relocated or swapped out.
I'm sorry, did you say can or cannot?
I think that I think it's very case by case, and it depends on if they have a customized base but anything can be done with money.
Yeah, right. I just know that there have been cases where things have been relocated for an event, for example, or perhaps you were trying to showcase a particular artist and there was an event and they could be relocated and then moved around. So I was just curious about that. And then just regarding the regional collaboration, it was sort of my same question. Could you then move them from region to region?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Ridgeway has a space to create that they opened a few years ago. And so they were just very excited to host the first one. But we are expecting that to move from different district to district.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to piggyback real quick off of what Kip was saying, because we've been working on the master plan for art since I was on the CDC years and years ago. And I just wanted to say I'm excited that it's finally coming, but I do want to say that one of the purposes of us originally doing this was for the maintenance piece of it, like what colors, what materials, making sure that it's we're keeping up with them looking good. We don't just install them and forget about them, that they continue to be maintained and they look well. And so I hope we're definitely utilizing this for that as well.
Yeah, we're certainly in touch with the city and their maintenance fund, which is separate from the creative district, but we're able to make those recommendations. Another thing we're doing is we're requesting for all lodgers tax murals to give us what paint they're using. That way for future repair, we'll have that log, and that archive doesn't exist, but it's something we're putting into place now.
And maybe if the artists too could give suggestions on how often they feel like maintenance should happen.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of contractual advice, especially when it's a publicly funded mural on a private building, in terms of how to handle that maintenance over 3, 5, 10 years. Yep. Thank you, everybody.
The next item on the agenda is Grandview Access Control Plan update.
Good afternoon, Mayor Yazzie, Mayor Pro Tem Woodruff, councilors. I'm Bob Lowry, the interim public works director. This item is to update you on the Grandview Access Control Plan in preparation for some upcoming public meetings from which you may receive comments from constituents, and we don't want you blindsided. The Grandview Access Control Plan is a joint project between CDOT and La Plata County and the city of Durango to improve safety along highways 160 and 172. It covers Highway 160 from the old Farmington Hill intersection east to Elmore's Corner, and Highway 172 from Elmore's Corner south to the intersection with County Road 302. The project was initiated in 2008 and had a few starts and stops until 2021. Staff last updated council in November of 2022 in preparation for the first round of public meetings. Near the end of 2023, there was a large public meeting that was quite controversial with a lot of constructive feedback. In 2024, the project was on hold due to budget constraints and the need to address some of the more significant changes to the plan than anticipated, as well as additional public meetings added to the scope to continue working through citizen concerns. This year, the project restarted and updates were made based on public input. Here this afternoon is Steve Winters from SEH Engineering, who will run through a quick update on the project. Steve?
Thank you, sir. Hi, I'm Steve Winters, SEH, as Mr. Lowry mentioned, and I'll try to keep this brief, but there is a lot of, nuance to this project, so I'll try to go in depth, but if you have any questions, I'll certainly be happy to answer those at the end. This is a slide deck that you all received and formed the basis of the information that was and will be provided to the residents along 160 and 172, and I should say the residents and the business owners, because all of them are stakeholders as a part of the project. this is just really the agenda. We walked through the purpose and need, why access control plans are a good idea, how to implement the plan, talk about the project status. We'll talk about next steps, and then questions and feedback. And this, again, will be information that will be presented to the public in the near future. As Mr. Lowry mentioned, the project really starts at the old 550-160 intersection at Farmington Hill, goes up to Elmore's Corner along US 160. And then it continues out Highway 172 towards the airport, and really that sharp left-hand corner at Highway 302. So that's the project location. This is just some information about the highways, their classifications as a part of this CDOT network. They are both state and U.S. highways, so it is a joint effort by the city, La Plata County, and CDOT to implement this access control plan. Really, the purpose and need and why we're here talking about this is that both of those are heavily traveled highways right now. When you think about going through Grandview, there's the center turn lane, but there's a lot of uncontrolled access points along there. You have commercial properties, you have businesses, you have residents that are all coming onto and off of that highway. And in 2020, the ADT was about 23,000 vehicles per day, and that is expected to grow both on 160 and 172 by about 25% over the next 15 years into the future. And the image on the lower right-hand corner, basically as you start to increase classification of roadways, you have more traffic, more speed, but you want less access points, because what happens is you start to have accidents, you start to have congestion, and it's not meeting the intent or the need of those roads anymore. So these are two roads that are becoming saturated to the point where we need to start talking about ways to plan for their future. So that's really what this exercise is. A couple of things. Currently, if a developer or someone that wants to increase basically the density of their property comes in to the city and the county, they would go through the planning process through the community development departments. In addition to that, they would have to get a CDOT access permit, which requires them to mitigate the impacts of their development on CDOT's highways, so 160, 172. What happens in these areas without an access control plan is that you kind of get this piecemeal development, and you don't know what the priorities should be as far as who's developing what. Do you need turn lanes? Do you need to prohibit left turns? Do you need right in, right outs? Do you need frontage roads? Do you need additional city streets and county roads? My screen went dark, sorry. So really what the goal of this is to move into an access control plan, which considers the corridor as a whole entity and starts to prioritize what needs to be done. Like I said, some of those improvements, and I can talk about some of those in a second, but the city currently has an access control plan for Camino del Rio along basically from the Doubletree to the intersection at the Durango-Silverton narrow gauge railroad. So some of the implementation things are the medians that have been put in over the last few years, limiting access along that corridor. So that's really the purpose of this. And I will say it really becomes a planning tool and a document for your community development department, so that when somebody comes in and says, I want to redevelop my property, your staff and professionals can say, okay, here's what the future state of the highways look like. We don't want to do anything like put a building or build a house or develop something that would preclude that from happening in the future. So it's information for your staff, really. It is a living document. If all three entities, the city, county, and CDOT, want to amend it, it can be amended in the future through the intergovernmental agreement. Here's just kind of a little bit of the differences between the two, between the access control code, which, like I said, that's parcel specific versus the access control plan, which is really corridor dependent, and it thinks holistically about these two roads. Couple of things that I talked about. The goal, we're trying to reduce conflict points. Left turns are a huge driver of accidents and the severity. So you're trying to limit left turns. You're trying to stop those severe accidents. And frankly, the solution in highway engineering a lot is add lanes. We don't want to do that. We don't want to, if you build it, they will come. We want to do things that will increase the traffic flow through smart development and smart methodologies. So we're trying to increase the lifespan of those streets in highways and help with the corridor in the future. Again, some of the other things that I mentioned, you want to move the access points off of the main roads. You want to consolidate those to minor roads. Auxiliary lanes are things that you would look at. And then frankly, consolidating access points, if two properties can share, or you can push those to another location, that works. Right in, right outs would be another option. As I mentioned, project goals: provide safe and efficient travel, really maintain the system, give the county and the city planning staff the tools for smart growth in these areas in the future, because as water and some of the other utilities becomes more available in these areas, there will be a lot of growth and development along 160 and along 172 in the future. Implementation, this is one of the more, I'll say this at the, I think you called it spirited feedback, but the general public had a hard time understanding what would trigger improvements. And I will say that, the city, county, and CDOT does not have the money to go out and build any of these right now. So really what's going to happen is this would be put into place. And as future development occurs, some of the private developers or landowners may be implementing some of these, but I will say that there's no real trigger for any of this. Status quo is that things will remain the same until someone comes knocking at a community development door and says, I want to develop this. And you're going to have to meet all of the zoning requirements, all the code for the city or county, depending on what it is. And I know a lot of this is also in the joint planning area, but the default is that unless CDOT comes through, with 160 and does a major project through there, probably this will be a static plan and document for the foreseeable future. That being said, they are spending money along 160 and 550. So maybe in the future there would be some sort of change, but really this is not going to trigger a bunch of bulldozers showing up at people's doorsteps in any way, shape, or form. It's really the redevelopment of these parcels that's going to trigger some of these improvements and requirements. And like I said, it's a tool and a planning document for when that happens and when the folks come in to talk. Few other things, and as Mr. Lowry mentioned, we did have the public meeting in the fall of 2023. We have been working on basically the county along 172 received a lot of feedback from Mesa Meadows and Knowles Circle about their desire not to have major impacts. So SEH looked at turning 172 from some frontage and backage roads into a right in, right out with a center median, where you start sending cars and vehicles out of direction along that intersection, and you end up with some roundabouts for people to turn around and then come back into town. So we spent the last 3 to 6 months working on a traffic study to make sure that we weren't causing unintended consequences. So we've been working on that, but it's that's been the main thrust. We didn't find any significant impacts. We made the modifications to 172, which should be less impactful to those properties. So really, we, as Mr. Lowry said, we want you aware of the project. The plan now would be to go talk to some of those HOAs and some of the smaller groups that will be impacted, and then eventually have a public meeting later this fall or early winter to continue to move this forward so that we can advance the project. That being said, and I'll kind of show some of the slide deck here, but we have basically a sheet that shows each of the improvements in the areas. So up on the screen now is the Farmington Hill area. Not a lot of access in that because CDOT's done a lot of the work. As you progress through Grandview, you can kind of see some of the current access points that have direct access into the highway. Eventually, those would be moved off to secondary roads. CDOT did a lot of this work as a part of their EIS for 160, which was done roughly 10 years ago. So we're really just building on that and basically memorializing it with this access control plan. Again, more access points taken off of the highway, and the plan in the Grandview area would be to have streets and roads at the backside of these commercial properties as they develop, so that they would have access points and the ability to access in those locations. And then the major intersections, think Three Springs Boulevard, some of the county roads along there, they would be the main points of access. I'll say this is, again, you want to have this in place so that people know, don't build a building here. Don't put your things that are high value in the way of future progress. So that's really what we're trying to get to. And frankly, some of the developments, you would phase them and build them in such a way that they can work now facing the highway and in the future as their access potentially changes. And then this is 172. Again, it was really the private residents along 172 that were the most vocal as a part of the last public meeting, and we have since changed a lot of the thought and plans in the future to be really a right in, right out with a couple of roundabouts along 172 between Elmore's and between 302 to help people get turned around. So next steps. We're here talking to you today. We just want your buy-in and want to make sure that you're aware of the project. And then the plan is to have some small meetings this fall and then have another major public meeting this fall to continue to advance the project. And then really this winter and next spring, it would be turned over to the city, the county, and CDOT to work on an intergovernmental agreement where they're all on board so that it's implemented. So that being said, any questions?
Hey man, how are you? Good to see you.
Good. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. A couple of questions. The access control plan on 160, I assume that seasonal increases and decreases in traffic were factored into some of these conversations about how those will be developed. I just don't want to put something in and all of a sudden we see 60,000, average daily travelers because of summertime.
Yep. You really design it in traffic engineering. It's like the 20th highest day. So you don't do the maximum, but you also don't do the median. So you're planning for a big pulse of traffic, but it's not the peak one, but it's the 20th out of 365. So whatever percentage that is.
Okay, great. And then since this is a living document, what is the process for somebody that wants to, or anybody that wants to try to create something different? Or
yeah, what I will say is it wouldn't necessarily be a private landowner or a developer that would be the nexus or the reason, but they could have influence. So it's got to be the city, it's got to be the county, and it's got to be CDOT. So if those three entities do not see the value of changing this document, then it wouldn't be changed. So if you have, a big box retailer say, I want to go gobble up a bunch of land on 172, they can't just go petition CDOT or make the change because there wouldn't really be a benefit. So they could work with your staff to try to do that, but it would really need to be proven to the three entities that you want to change it.
Right, that's my next question, is the majority of the three stakeholders probably need.
I don't think it's a majority, but that would be fleshed out in the IGA. And I think it's all three would have to be in agreement because all three are agreeing to it. And I don't think, the county and CDOT could come and strong arm, the city into changing something. It's really got to be all three.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks for the presentation. The slide that was on 160 had a lot of access points that were potentials to get closed off. So is there a tipping point? I mean, you allow redevelopment to happen over decades. I understand that, but at a certain point, some properties are just not going to change over, or they're not going to redevelop to a certain point. So do you eliminate half of these through waiting for it to happen through redevelopment?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I would guess that would be the natural progression of this, is that it will get implemented and some of these will redevelop. I'm thinking like, the power sports and then the little retail store. Those are the types of developments that would go in the interim. There would be requirements and there would be you cannot develop your site plan in such a way that prohibits some of these things in the future. What I can envision is that eventually CDOT will, as they build the corridor from Durango to Bayfield, will want to come in and make some of these changes to the highway. And it's probably going to go to, a right in, right out situation first. And then should they become fully funded, there's a significant number of county roads and backage roads, for a lack of a better term, that need to be constructed, and there's no funding mechanism, and it's going to be expensive. So it's going to take a long time for this to happen. So I would guess that, yes, some of these properties will probably redevelop. There will probably be some changes in access. It doesn't prohibit them obtaining an access permit, but it's got some strings attached to it.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I was curious. Okay, so it sounds like you eliminated a frontage road there on both sides of 160, and you're leaning towards putting the roads behind the businesses, having all of those come to one point.
It's a little combination of both. I will say, in this view that I have up, 233 is the county road that goes on the north side of 160. So that would be a source of access for a lot of these properties. But you can see on the north side, we are proposing a road basically down the center line of a lot of those properties. So in the future, a road would be built there. On the south side of the highway, it's really a frontage road along some of those. So it's a little bit of a combination of both. And the document is very detailed with the proposal. And like I said, it's been vetted. A lot of this work comes through the EIS that CDOT commissioned as a part of the 160 redevelopment.
All right, thanks. Shirley?
Thank you. Thank you. So any opportunity for protected bike lanes or any other alternative transportation?
We have not had that conversation as a part of this project. What I will say, it's come up a few times. I know that the city has a mechanism to do that with the Parks and Recs department. The county has struggled with that because they don't have the ability or the funding for the bike lanes and trails. So it really wasn't a part of our scope. Happy to have the conversation, but it's kind of been, the discussion was the county doesn't have a mechanism to do it. It's really not a part of this, but I will say these are not engineering plans and they are not finished products. So there will be opportunities when, say, the projects are designed and looked at in the future to integrate some of those things, if that makes sense.
I guess not a requirement from CDOT to include protected bike lanes?
Correct. It was not, none of the organizations, I guess, have asked or directed us to have that conversation as a part of this. Yep.
Any more? We're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the speed management plan.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, City Council, Devin King, Multimodal Manager for the city. We are here this evening to present on the speed management plan, and I have Elena Onen over here from HDR, and she will present to y'all. She is the project manager for the consultant side.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us today. So I'm here to chat with you about the speed management plan. Oh, there's a screen down here. Oh, nice. So this project kicked off about a year ago. Next slide. Oh, thank you. This is new to me. Thanks. This project kicked off about a year ago. So we are in the final quarter of the project. And so why are we doing this project? So in alignment with Durango's strategic objectives to provide safe, accessible, and reliable mobility options and transportation for the city, this project was identified to address safety. Between 2016 and 2021, there were 71 injury crashes and there were 7 people who died on Durango's roads. So the goal of this plan is to create a consistent and holistic approach to reduce speeds on Durango roads. So I'm going to go through this presentation. We're going to talk about the 3 aspects of this plan, which is the project overview, tell you a little bit more about it, engagement that's been done and is planned, and then the demonstration and toolbox for the strategic part of this plan. So project overview, the city is developing a speed management plan to reduce speeding and crashes. And when we're talking about crashes, we're talking about crash potential. The plan will include a toolbox of strategies, which will include engineering, education, and enforcement. And the strategies will reduce speeds and follow national best practices. So there's 2 key parts of this project. The first part is doing the research. So we're looking at data, doing data analysis, collecting and looking at data, speed data. We're gathering input from the community, and we are also working with stakeholders, so internal, police, streets, maintenance, schools, to get their input onto what is feasible for strategies on Durango streets. And the second part of this is a demonstration and toolbox. We've identified a location, I'll talk more about this in a little bit, but 2 locations for a demonstration project, temporary. And this is focused on high speeding and crash potential. And then we'll be developing a toolbox of strategies that will help staff and the public understand what's available to help reduce speeds. So public engagement, we performed a digital survey. We had a stakeholder workshop, which was internal to city staff and agencies. And then we have an open house scheduled for later this month on the 28th. The digital survey was conducted May 9th through June 3rd. We had 522 contributors with 603 responses, which might look funny, but the reason we have more responses than contributors is we had a couple of select all options within the survey. It aimed to capture public sentiment about speeding and what the results are from speeding and personal experiences. The majority of folks responded that their primary concerns were people not following traffic rules and people not following or driving at the posted speed limit. 62% of people who responded said that they think speeding is a problem on Durango streets. The stakeholder workshop we held on June 16th here in Durango, and it included the school district, the fire department, 911 dispatch, streets department, traffic engineering, planning department, multimodal department, public engagement, outreach, and Colorado Department of Transportation. And the purpose of this workshop was to go through 30 plus different types of strategies and talking through everybody's concerns from their different responsibilities at the city on, if we put in certain strategies that slow down the passenger car, what's called the managed vehicle, what will that impact then be on larger vehicles, say fire trucks? And so going through everybody's concerns and then narrowing down the number of strategies that we are considering for the toolbox so that most departments can manage those strategies once they're installed on streets. And then what is planned later this month is an open house and to discuss this project. Everything was going according to plan until it doesn't. So this is a federally funded project through Safe Streets for All. And as part of that funding, there was 2 pieces of it. We had to create designs to ensure that we were meeting environmental policies So we got that all in well in advance, and that was required before they actually released the funding to pay for the installation of the demonstration projects. As we all know, there were some changes in our administration, and so the approval to release the additional funding to pay for the demonstrations, we are still waiting on that. So right now we are planning to install the demonstrations in the spring since we haven't received those funds. So at the open house, we will be, instead of asking folks to talk about their experiences driving through the demonstrations or walking or riding through the demonstrations, we'll be talking more about the process. Okay, demonstrations and toolbox. So as I mentioned, we've identified 2 locations to install temporary speed management strategies. And we'll have a whole public information campaign asking folks to go experience these demonstrations once they're installed, and then asking for their feedback. The purpose of them is to reduce speed and test speed reduction effectiveness, to practice and see what the road maintenance would look like and the road maintenance impacts with those installed, the impact to emergency services, and to test broader implementation on similar streets within Durango. The locations that have been identified is an arterial and a collector. The arterial is Gigline Gulch from Fort Lewis Drive to Hillcrest Drive / Linda Court. This is currently a 2-lane arterial with a 2-way left turn lane going through it. And so what this project would do is eliminate the 2-way left turn lane, still allowing a left turn lane where needed, and then narrowing up those lanes, and then in the additional space that is available on that road, putting in a buffered bike lane. One of the concerns on some of our arterials, which was mentioned in the previous presentation, is space for bikes. This would also allow for pedestrians to use that space where there is not continuous sidewalk on Gigline. The idea here is it is shown that reduced lane widths can help reduce speed, but does not impact capacity on roadways, an important distinction. And we'll also be testing out, the maintenance of buffered bike lanes along that corridor. As through the lane narrowing, it is a good idea usually to occupy that space. If you leave it open, driver perception is that wide space is more comfortable to drive in faster. If you narrow that space, create some friction, so to speak, drivers are less comfortable driving faster. So the idea is to get to the posted speed limit. The second location is Riverview Drive, from Animas Place to Animas Place. There's a little circular street there, and this will be testing out chicanes, which are applications that narrow the road, and it switches from side to side. So it's putting in what bulb outs essentially, so that drivers have to turn their wheels slightly to continue down the street instead of it just being a straight path. And it has been shown to reduce speeds. This was selected for this roadway because there are a handful of neighborhood collectors, so to speak, where we have fronting driveways on collector roads. And so we didn't want to impact people's driveways, and we wanted to preserve as much on-street parking as possible. Okay. And then finally, the pilot project toolbox or demonstration project toolbox. The goal here is to have it to be community supported. It will be thinking with a permanent installation in mind for an end product, so that we wouldn't be recommending anything that couldn't be a permanent installation in a temporary condition. So that would be permanent and quick build solutions, scalable improvements across Durango, and a clear process for implementation. So the next couple of slides are this is a draft of the process that we're putting together. So the idea here is staff would use this, and the public, this would be public facing. So the public would also know when they call in to the city saying, hey, I'm concerned about speeding on my street. I'm concerned about safety on my street. What is the process? This would be something that both staff and residents could look at, and staff would use as a guiding document on how to select or bring forward projects. So the first step would be identifying. The second step would be planning for the implementation, and then preparing, installing it, and then importantly, evaluating the installation. So if there needs to be adjustments when an installation is out there, we can monitor it and then make those changes to see if it will be effective. If an installation, and during that evaluation period, it'd be determined if it is effective, what would be the next steps. If it's not, there's a different path. If it is effective, the next step would be going to ACT. And that would then be a process that's outside of the scope of this project, but figuring out how to get it into potentially a capital improvements project to make a permanent installation. It also will identify based on street types, local, collector, arterial, who should be involved because they have different stakeholders. Regional input might not be necessary for a local street, but it would be really important to involve the residents on that local street on what's happening on their block or several blocks. And vice versa on a regional route or arterial, it would be important to get a broader perspective on those speed management strategies. And that is the presentation. So open to questions.
Jessica.
Yeah, I know originally we had 3 options with these pilot programs, and I do love the idea of these pilot programs and being able to like test and talk and make sure there's not unintended consequences before installing something. Since we're not getting funding until the spring potentially, or these aren't getting installed to the spring, will we be able to do that 3rd one somewhere else maybe that has more support, community support? I'm not saying that exact back in diagonal parking, or is that scrapped? We didn't submit the designs for it, so we're out.
So we did do designs specific to that location, taking into account driveways and different specific context sensitive solutions on that stretch. So we can't just pick up that design and drop it somewhere else, which is, this is part of the process, right? It's taking context into consideration when we're looking at projects like that. We don't have funding in the project to design another location this time because we spent time trying to get that one ready because we had to have those designs ready back in March to submit to FHWA because we wanted to be well ahead of our planned installation for August. So we did the designs, and then based on some feedback, we went ahead and scratched that location.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Julie.
Thank you, Mayor. So thank you for the presentation. So is the main thing or the only thing that you're concerned about is speed?
This is also crash reduction. So it is concerning safety. The number one contributing factor to most serious injury and fatal crashes is speeding, also distracted driving. But the faster you go, the less reaction time you have to avoid a crash.
So because you mentioned bike lanes in the Goldling Gulch street, do you measure perhaps more people cycling?
That could be part of the data collected, is seeing how many bicyclists are out there and seeing if it increases when the installation goes in. Okay,
is that, but not necessarily part of the study, or could I request that you include that, or what does that look like if we wanted to see if it encouraged more people cycling?
I might need to defer to staff to see if that is a capability for the data collection.
Right now, the survey that we have drafted up that Yelena's team came up with does talk about comfort level for cyclists. We have been getting out and doing more and more surveys. That's something we can take a look at for sure.
I don't know if it's a big enough stretch of road, but perhaps, I think that would be important information to have if it's possible to include that in your data collection.
Yeah, we'll take a look at how we could potentially do that.
Okay, so.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your work on this. Okay, so my concern is the fact that when you look at our financial picture across the nation long term, there definitely is going to be budget cuts. Okay, we're not going to get away from that. Now, with these pilot projects, they're all great when we have plenty of money to do them, but we're going to be looking at reduced discretionary funding coming long term. Now, is it possible, since what we want is safety, speed reduction, and I'm really for the buffered bike lanes, since we do know that reducing the width of the driving lanes definitely slows down traffic, why can't we just run with that?
And not do buffered bike lanes?
No, include buffered bike lanes. I think that's a real critical point because there's a lot of people who bike around here.
Mm-hmm.
If slowing down the lanes is what actually slows people down, why don't we just do that?
I think I need some more clarification on the question, like as make like a lane width as policy for the city?
Possibly where there's a lot of
Standard-
congestion
standard
around
width.
school zones, where it's really critical that we watch out for bicyclists and pedestrians. I mean, because these studies, they're all great. I like the information, but when you think about the financial impact of what's going to happen, in the coming years, there's probably not going to be money for these projects. Why can't we just focus on lane reduction to slow down the traffic of the cars?
Yep. So there's a lot of answers to that question, some of which are out of the scope of the project I'm working on, but I can say across the nation that a lot of entities are starting to look at narrowing down and making a standard lane width of 10 feet. There are some concerns with that. If you've got horizontal curves, so, curvy road, the larger the vehicle, we might, there's certain design aspects that have to be considered as you go around a corner and say a tractor trailer is going through a road, you don't want that tractor trailer to drag through a bike lane on the turn. So those are all just design factors though, but standards is the starting point. Also speed management and safety is 10-foot lanes isn't the solution to the whole problem. It's more than that. And the more strategies we can stack to get to the design speed and the desired speed on a road, the better. So 10-foot lanes is one piece of it. And then the more we can do out there, generally the better we get to getting to most drivers going the desired speed. So it's a starting point. Oh, yep. Sorry, didn't I?
And I'll just add one thing, but that is one reason why we are looking at the quick build section of this plan. To your point, capital improvement projects are very expensive. They also take a lot of time, but that's kind of the beauty of the quick build portion of this plan that allows us to get something out there quicker and respond to concerns. The other issue is in the city of Durango, we don't stripe every street, right? We mainly stripe arterials, some collectors, we don't stripe locals at all. So if it's a local street, take example, Fifth Avenue. We don't stripe it, but it's also a lot wider. So to Elena's point earlier, even if we do stripe it and there's still just empty space, that doesn't fully get those speeds down where we want them. So yeah, to her point, there's a lot of nuances to it.
Devin, before you sit down, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at the tail end of this, you developed some tools that work in certain areas of the city. You're trying to find the right size tool for the right problem.
Correct.
And some of those tools are going to be more expensive, totally out of budget, but some of those are going to be better choices when we do have the budget. Am I close?
Yep. And
Okay.
some of them will have better temporary options than others.
Okay, great. And I guess just for my personal stuff, you guys have taken a lot of hits on the speed plan development, both federally and locally. And I just want to appreciate the time and the energy that you put into it, regardless of how long it's going to stretch out. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you, Devin. Thank you. Any more questions? Oh, let me go.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a presentation on marijuana and all other business license fees and how Durango fees compare.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a licensing and permit fees presentation brought to you by the City Clerk's Office and Community Development. And I'm Ben Florine, Chief Deputy Clerk in the Clerk's Office, and I'm joined by Dana DeBolt, who's our Deputy Clerk of Liquor Licensing, and then also by Jamie Lopko, the Community Development Director. So real quick, again, this presentation will cover business, liquor, and marijuana licensing fees, and then also permit and development fees. We feel that this presentation supports a few different strategic plan goals, including organizational stewardship, because by reviewing license and permit fees, we can appropriately pair together costs of service for business support and regulation, and then also supporting the strategic plan goal of engaged and informed community by allowing us to take a holistic look at what it takes to do business in Durango and making sure processes and fees have alignment with comparable municipalities. We want Durango to be an attractive place to do business, so it's valuable for us to examine how these processes and fees will help businesses thrive. Before I start talking license fees, just want to let you know we provided a few handouts to you guys of summaries of our license fees and then of these comparable towns as total dollar amounts. But then we also provided a supplemental fee packet in the agenda packet as an attachment, which further breaks down application fees, renewal fees, XYZ for all these towns we're going to review. So this is a little bit more high level with just total comparable numbers. So before we jump into fee types, I wanted to review Durango's general business license fees. So our current fee structure was adopted in 2009 and went into effect on January 1st, 2010. Our general business license authorizes businesses to operate in town for professional services, retail sales, or both. Licenses serve as a sales tax license as well, which is the anchor that collects any sales or lodging tax from our local businesses. So as a home rule municipality, we collect our own tax. We don't let the Department of Revenue do it. We do it ourselves. It's valuable for many reasons. We know what businesses are coming into city limits. We have eyes on the ground. We see within the organization who's applying for sign permits, building permits. So we have a more effective approach at collecting our own sales tax and licensing our businesses. So also the general business license serves as a starting point and connection for other municipal regulation like land use, code enforcement, and finance. Each of these departments review new businesses that are in city limits, review and approve prior to us issuing a license. We also have an assortment of additional licenses that may be required for certain types of work in town, and we'll review that a bit more shortly. So, let me see here. Sorry. Before we jump into general licenses, I actually want to pause and review one other license type we have, which is a sales tax only license. This is for businesses that have no physical presence in Durango, however, generate regular revenue. So think online businesses like Airbnb, Zappos Shoes, or other online services like LegalZoom. Historically, we've charged $25 for a sales tax only license, renewed annually. There's a one-time $30 app fee. But with the expansion of online commerce, Colorado approved Senate Bill 22-32 in 2022. And that state bill essentially eliminated local licensing fees for remote sellers. So it was intended to be more business friendly to businesses that have a one-time sale. And it mitigated excessive license fees for businesses and streamlined tax collection at the state level. In that bill, it said local authorities can't charge for licenses like this anymore. So we no longer charge for sales tax only licenses. They're all free. So getting back into regular business licenses, you'll see on the screen, here's a summarized spreadsheet of all license fees general license fees for Durango, and then also from a few comparable towns. Durango starting on the left and then moving to the right, some of those other towns. This focuses on towns that have mid to large size populations, are semi-rural, and also have a relative amount of tourism. And then we also threw in some mid-sized cities on the Front Range as well. So you'll see Durango, Fort Collins, Montrose, Pagosa Springs, and Colorado Springs. These fees presented we are focusing on small businesses. So ours is for 0 to 5 employees. It's a $50 license fee and a $30 application fee. And then we included the small business style licenses for each of these other towns as well. For event licenses, we also included those. Durango's $55 to apply. You'll see those similar comparisons. And then, like I had mentioned, we have a complete breakdown of all of these on the supplemental fee packet. Just kind of some quick comparisons. Durango charges $80 for a new app. Fort Collins does not charge any license fees for any of their businesses. They only issue a free sales tax only license. However, their event licenses are $100, so kind of some variability there. You'll see sales tax rates at the bottom for each of these. Fort Collins is 4.35%, so a little larger than ours. And then like Colorado Springs, they actually don't charge license fees unless you're a certain type of business. In the breakdown in the packet, you'd see massage therapists, plumbers, some other businesses like that they do charge for, but it's only if applicable. So I think in general, a good takeaway for our general business licenses is that Durango is relatively in the middle. Each of these different towns has a different way of doing things, but we kind of find that we're a little bit in the middle of the ones that we reviewed for general business licenses and event licenses. So moving on to marijuana licensing, these next two licenses are going to focus on medical marijuana and retail marijuana. Currently in Durango, we only allow licensing for medical marijuana, retail marijuana, and then testing licenses for each medical and retail. We currently have 2 medical marijuana licenses, 11 retail licenses, and then we do not have any testing businesses anymore, though we do allow them. So again, this slide right here is going to focus on medical marijuana license fees along with the applicable tax rates. Though these license fees and taxes are revenues for cities, it's important to look at the license fees specifically as a cost of service to allow for time for multiple departments to review and approve renewals and new applications, along with annual support and touch points with different departments around the city. So, we don't bill them every time we talk with them or work with them. The idea is that these license fees are a cost of service. And these were developed in 2014, I think readopted in 2014. So sticking with medical marijuana, you'll see this fee comparison with similar cities as the business license comparison. However, we left off Montrose because they still have a moratorium on marijuana. Ignacio still actually does as well. But in general, not just our medical marijuana fees, but amongst most municipalities, medical marijuana fees and taxes are a bit lower, with the idea that patients can get product cheaper without excess taxes. For Durango, we charge $10,000 for a new license application, $8,000 for a renewal, and then we have our 3.5% regular tax rate for medical marijuana sales. We are on the higher end of the fee structures for the towns that we researched for application and renewal. And if you needed a further breakdown of all these fees, you can look in our supplemental fee packet. You would see items like renewal fees, operating fees, application fees, license fees. There's a bunch of different semantics, but these are the totals. And then, yeah, the sales tax rates are at the bottom there, applicable to medical marijuana sales. Moving forward to retail marijuana. Durango is still on the higher end of license fees. However, the other comparable cities are slightly more in line with our fees as opposed to medical marijuana. Retail marijuana, like I had mentioned, has higher fees and taxes. So Durango license fees are $10,000 to apply for a new license, and then $8,000 to renew the license. Once again, a more thorough breakdown of all of Durango's fees and all of these fees are available in the supplemental fee packet. But you could see Fort Collins for a new app is actually a little more than us, and their renewal is a little more. Fort Collins has a slightly higher sales tax rate, 4.35%, so they're getting a little more tax from marijuana sales on the back end. Another interesting one we found, Grand Junction, they charge the same for us for a new application, and then a renewal is 7,500. But I think most interestingly with Grand Junction is they have a cap of 10 licenses, 10 marijuana licenses in their town. They're all retail licenses in Grand Junction. Their voters also approved an additional 6% marijuana tax on all of their marijuana sales. So that's in addition to the 3.39 regular tax rate. And then there's also a 5% excise tax on wholesale, an additional excise tax on wholesale marijuana that's sold from the cultivators to the retail shops. So Grand Junction has quite a bit higher taxes on their marijuana licensing, generating specifically quite a bit more revenue in sales tax, but the voters approved it there. And I think the only other kind of key takeaway is that we found some of our neighbors like Pagosa Springs, they have substantially lower license fees for a new application and renewal. Theirs is a lot more simple, just $3,000 to apply, $2,000 to renew. But then Pagosa also does not have any additional marijuana taxes. And from what I could find, their sales tax rate is split with Archuleta County, which is 4%. So I believe they're getting 2% back, but they're getting quite a bit less revenue on sales tax and license fees on marijuana. I'm not sure if that's covering their cost of service or, you know, what that might be creating for them. So yeah, just some key takeaways on retail marijuana. And then right now I'm going to pass it over to Dana DeBolt, who's our Deputy Clerk of Liquor Licensing. She manages all 150 licenses in our town.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, and I will be touching on liquor license fees. I would like to begin by reviewing the structure of liquor license fees. Liquor license fees are set by the state. Within these fees, there are set limits that municipalities are allowed to charge for both new and transfer license applications, along with a handful of other miscellaneous permits and license adjustment items. Occupational tax is determined based on home rule municipal governance. If you are a home rule municipality, you can levy occupational taxes, which are essentially liquor taxes. Durango enacted the most current occupational tax and liquor license classification through ordinance in November of 2019. In this ordinance, the annual occupational tax was set upon businesses selling alcoholic beverages within the city, and a fee schedule and occupational classification were established. Statutory towns cannot charge additional fees in addition to the fees directed by the State Liquor Enforcement Division's fee schedule. The fees in the next slide reflect what the City of Durango currently charges for new liquor license applicants and annual renewals, and how the totals add up within some of the most popular license types. Here you can see a comparison of liquor license fees from similar towns, focusing on popular licenses in Durango, specifically hotel and restaurant and retail liquor store licenses. Each of the other municipalities we used for comparison is charging the maximum $1,000 amount allowed by the state for their liquor license applications. Durango charges $875, putting us $125 under the state maximum for application fees. Neither Montrose nor Pagosa Springs, although also home rule municipalities, have implemented occupational taxes in addition to the state regulated liquor license fees. This is the reason that the cost difference looks so significant between these two towns compared to ours. Colorado Springs and Grand Junction both charge annual occupational taxes in relation to their business classifications and liquor licensing. There is a slight difference in occupational taxes based on license type, with Colorado Springs and Grand Junction being approximately $100 less than Durango. So the key takeaways we found were that everybody else is charging $1,000 for their application fee versus our $875 here. Everybody is charging the state regulated license fees across the board, and our occupational taxes, their occupational taxes are slightly lower than Durango's, approximately $100.
Now we'll pass it over to Jamie.
Sorry.
While community development has many development-related fees, this presentation is just going to focus on those related to a new business. So if desired, we can have a broader discussion about development-related fees at a later date. So community development for a business license, any new business is likely going to need probably several approvals from us. It can range from a change of use, renovations, constructing a new building. So it might require more applications than just one. So for a new business, they're likely going to need a site plan review, potentially a conditional or special use permit. And they will, of course, likely need a sign permit. So on this slide, we have a couple of jurisdictions where we've included comparisons. Some are nearby. We included a couple of out of state just to give you a little more context. So we do have the cost of the 3 applications on this screen shows that our fees are a little on the low end of what other charges people are charging for a conditional use permit, a rezoning, or a sign permit. So on the next slide, we have our major variance and major site plan fees. I did include a variance and rezoning just in case that it's an application you wanted to see because it is sometimes needed for our business to get one of those. But you can see our variance and major site plan fees do run a little bit higher than some of the jurisdictions in Colorado. So if we were to take a business, say a marijuana use in Durango, they would need a $350 fee for a limited use permit. All of the businesses are going to be a limited use permit. So that's a $300 fee, $350 fee for them. So if it's new construction, depending on the size, it'll be a minor or a major site plan. So that'll be $550 or $1,000 depending on the size. And of course, sign permit for $50. So it would be $1,400 for a large scale business of over 10,000 square feet building a new building, and then $950 for a small business. If they were just moving into an existing building, they would just need the limited use permit and sign permit, and that would be about $400. So if we move on to building related fees, those are a little less clear for us to set an example because those are going to be based on the cost of construction. So what I have on the slide is basically the lowest possible fee for a building permit. If it's $500 or less, around $24. But that will go up based on the cost of construction. And right now we are pretty on target. We're similar to Pagosa and La Plata County with those. Most projects will require a mechanical permit separate of their building permit, and some may choose to do solar. So those are the 3 that we picked out for businesses. And the cost of both of those permits for hours are a little bit on the low side compared to other jurisdictions. But without the cost of construction, it's going to be difficult to give you a cost estimate similar to planning fees of what somebody thinks that. And lastly, I would just note that planning and building permit fees are designed to cover the cost of staff's times and resources to put out that service. I just wanted to lastly let you know for reference, there are other fees that people will come across depending on the type of application they bring forward for a new business. We have a major street impact fee. We have our plant investment fees for water and sewer. We have our use tax, and then also Durango Fire Protection District has their own permitting and impact fees as well. And all of those are usually paid at the time a building permit is issued. Everything? Oh, okay. Okay, I can answer any questions.
Jessica?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate all the time it took to get all these and the comparisons. I appreciate it. Is it much more time intensive for a marijuana business license versus a regular any other business license?
For a general business license compared to a marijuana license, yes.
Like,
particularly with new applications.
okay. But like renewals and such, like, is it like, I mean, because that is, if you look at, I mean, I'd have to go back and I didn't do the math, how much the percentage higher is.
Yeah, definitely. So just to give you a little history, the most current marijuana fees were readopted in 2014 with the rollout of retail marijuana. So the fees were developed, like I mentioned, as a cost of service. At the time, it was a brand new program with the city of Durango, so it involved way more time at the time to develop all the land use codes, legal code, licensing processes, and everything. So it may have been more appropriate 11 years ago. Right now, aside from the $8,000 renewal fee, we kind of look at each renewal as about 10 hours of combined staff work. So my office's work, police department review for incidents and background checks, code enforcement review and inspection, and then finance and sales tax compliance. So we're estimating about 10 hours to renew a license, and then also potentially about 5 to 10 hours of additional staff time a year, whether it's from PD assistants, planning and land use, like for sign update or something, clerk and finance. So we're kind of estimating it's from about 15 to 20 hours a year of staff time involved to maintain each marijuana license.
And I apologize. I know that we haven't changed these since it was implemented, and I know we were on new territory back then, and so I understand for the cost and what it was, because it did take so much of your guys' time, back when we first passed this. So I'm sorry I didn't clarify that, but I wanted to be sure, like the time difference between the two, because it is a significant jump up for those. Yeah, go ahead.
And I'll give it right back to you, but I'm just piggybacking on that. So how big of a difference is it between marijuana and alcohol?
I would say it probably takes about the same amount of time to renew a marijuana or a liquor permit or liquor license. However, liquor licenses are way cheaper to renew. I think in general, $675 for like a hotel restaurant. However, so they take about the same amount of time. I don't know that we have much cost of service recovery with liquor licenses. The other thing I'll just say anecdotally is the marijuana businesses seem to be a lot more well organized with their renewal information than a lot of the liquor businesses. And Dana's cringing right now because it's a lot more follow up with liquor licenses, I would say.
Okay. Those were my big questions. And I guess for the city manager, if I as one counselor wanted kind of like a staff suggestion on how to make sure this is equitable and fair and we're business friendly, could I request that under new business?
Sure.
Would that be the next step?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to know what the next step would be if, like, okay, now that we have all this information that you guys have compiled, and it's a good reflection, like you're saying, like the marijuana one takes just as much time as the liquor one, but the liquor one's way less. And I want us to obviously for our staff time, make time, and you guys know that I'm not the expert on time.
Sure.
and that sort of thing. And then these whatever they're called. Sorry, I'm not feeling well, but the comparisons. Thank you.
Yeah, I do think, and I was not here in 2014, but just kind of talking with some of the elected officials who were here, I know it did cost a lot to set up, but I also think that there was a thought process at that time that this would be a natural way to limit the amount of businesses that were to open up, not making it as friendly economically for it. So sometimes your fee structures and the influence of the reasoning behind it has changed maybe to what the council sees as it today. But I did want to point that part of it out is I do think it was at that part intentionally set in a way to kind of control how many licenses were going to come in.
No, I get that. I think we're in a different situation now with all that, but yes. Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you very much for all your time. I really do appreciate it.
Okay, Kip.
Mayor, I've got multiple questions. I'm happy just to take them speaker by speaker. And I would like to point out 156 to 11 ratio. I'm glad we don't care about alcohol and can have 150 of those, but we're really worried about marijuana.
Yeah.
Anyway, first off, the comparison cities that you chose, why were those chosen?
I think we started focusing just on the western slope and then wanted to kind of get some big city front range, figures injected in there. But like I had mentioned, we wanted to focus on towns that a little more rural with a little bit of tourism and similar to Durango. So we were also kind of kicking around Glenwood Springs and a few others, but these are the ones we landed on.
Okay. We talked about the difference in time it takes to process these licenses. And I asked the question, alcohol and marijuana are fairly similar. Is there anybody else that's close to those, or those are the two higher time required?
Yeah, that's it. All our licenses are kind of broken down into liquor, marijuana, and then regular licenses. And there's significantly more paperwork and approvals. And we're also working with the state as the other licensing authority. It's a dual licensing process. So
And the reasoning behind, what was it, pawnbrokers, tree trimmers, and solicitors' badges? I mean, the extra fees that we charge according to those is why?
Okay, so tree trimmers, this is all established via city code, I think a lot longer than 2014, but tree trimmers, the idea is if you're a business pruning trees, you also have to take the arborist exam with the city arborist. So it's not just paying a license fee and go to town. They want to make sure that you could skillfully and safely cut trees in town. The pawnbroker, or some of the other ones where we charge an additional fee, like lodger's tax, pawnbrokers, those don't take much additional staff time. But in the back end, I know police department regularly works with the pawn businesses for making sure that the goods they're selling there are allowed to be sold there. And there's also like a software reporting fee that the PD uses to cross-check all of these things. So we collect these fees and it facilitates the additional work outside of just the regular business license. Lodger's tax license is 25. Lodging is huge in town and they can't just get the license. They also have to have a short-term rental permit with community development. So there's a bit more cross-checking, making sure the permit is issued before we issue the license and whatnot.
Yeah, it's a study session, so I'm going to go off a little bit here, but in conjunction with what Councilor Buell was saying, there seems to me to be an element of there should be some kind of formula. If it's taking staff 2 extra hours to deal with pawnbrokers rather than solicitor fees, there ought to be some kind of equation that is driving this. It seems that that is not the case, that it has just been city ordinance that has tacked on an additional fee, and those fees have sat there for about 15 years or something. Is that correct?
For the marijuana fees, yeah.
Marijuana fees, but not necessarily the other ones?
Well, I guess I just don't have the historical knowledge with all those other fees. I've been here 11 years, but actually started in 14, but that's been my perception, is that we charge the pawnbroker fee to allow for that extra service from the police department and my office and cross-checking the solicitor's fees. We run a background check and all that. But I think you're right. We haven't sat down and clocked ourselves, without interruption and then kind of plug it into that formula.
Okay.
That hasn't been done.
Anything that we've followed through on in regards to equity among these fees, I think we ought to address those issues as well. It ought to be a formula of some kind, and you guys would be the best ones to understand that. Sure. Should I keep going, Mayor, or you want to take other turns? Okay. We haven't raised any fees in a long time. Does it make sense while we're doing an examination that some of these fees should move up? It seems to me that the cost of doing business has increased for the city as much as anybody else. Is there, in just general terms, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, but it's a study session and I can do that and you can tell me, I don't know. Sure. But do we feel like there's fees that should be raised? Not necessarily just from a comparison standpoint, but also from the fact that they've been the same fee for a decade?
This is my own opinion. Sure. I think our license fees are pretty modest and pretty comparable to other towns. And I think it shows that Durango is pro-business by, we haven't increased them in 15 years. I think our fees are appropriate and I think they're similar to other towns. I don't think that our cost of service or our additional staff work has not increased since 2010. I don't believe too much on getting these licenses, reviewing them, nudging other departments to review and approve them. I don't think that work has gone up too much in the past 11 years that I've been here. But I think it would probably take a holistic review with other departments who do touch some of the licensing to kind of confirm that. But that's simply my opinion.
Great. Thank you.
Can I add just a little bit onto that? We do have our finance team working for the first time to have a master fee schedule and placing that together that kind of looks at all of our fees throughout the entire organization and kind of having that for the budget approval process every year so that we can see kind of where our fee structure sets off, if you will, when we go through it. So that's something that we're also looking at. Obviously, these fees are, just as a point for y'all, do fund our general fund services. So any reduction in this would actually require a reduction in expenses as well, which then actually goes to the service level of services that we provide.
Fair to say that in doing that, though, we're isolating one business to take the burden if we're not looking at parity and making sure that every business is fairly represented in the fees that they pay.
I think it's going to depend on what you look at as your fairness of the business's portions. I do think the intent is to get to the part of where you're recovering your cost. But I don't think that that should be the leading cause, because there's no way we're going to be able to formulate that out. Some businesses are going to take longer than others. Some businesses are going to come back to us 3 or 4 different times in the process. And so it's very hard to come up with a formula based on a fee structure. And I think what you normally see from a organizational and municipal side is they look at what does it look normally for us, and then they compare it with around other municipalities, and are we out of line or are we in the middle? And that's usually how your counselors with staff recommendations come with, this is how we develop our fees.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. I did not understand occupational tax. And I'm sorry to maybe bog down. I don't want to bog us down here, but all of a sudden it started getting more complex there, and you kind of lost me on that one. So I don't know if you can give me the answer for a 4th grader, or this could be something that we take on the side as well.
So in our code, we have it established depending on your business license type. That's kind of how the occupational taxes are assigned. So they're only assigned to businesses that sell liquor.
Okay.
So essentially liquor taxes for those.
I'll just say it is a fixed amount. So like a Class A is a liquor business that consumes on premise. And if I remember right, that's $500. So that is for a hotel, restaurant, liquor license downtown, or just like Zia, it's probably $675, $500 occupational tax based on that class, $100 renewal fee, $75 license fee.
Okay.
And then I think like I was working on the Circle K liquor license renewal earlier. I think theirs is like $200 plus a $2.03 license fee plus a $100 renewal fee.
And that's all off premise. So it's kind of, I think it more is based off of the amount of risk that the license has, with like police time and all of that stuff too.
Okay, that makes sense.
Considered for those.
Okay, great.
If you want something more, I'm happy to get the information
Yeah.
for you. I just don't have it in front of me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mayor, my last one's a question I'll take at the tail end because it's tangential to our discussion.
Sure, Kip. Okay. Thank you for the presentation. And apologize for, I didn't catch it. There are 11 retail and medical marijuana dispensaries in town?
11 retail shops, 2 medical, so a total of 13.
13.
And then
no testing facilities anymore.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So 13. And then the cost, I want to kind of get back to the cost of services piece. Is there any sort of thought about like community cost or police impacts or attorney impacts that are factored into, because alcohol might be different for community impact versus marijuana? And is that taken into consideration when we're talking about cost of services at all?
I'd say the short answer is no, because like I said, we didn't do a holistic review of, hey, police service technicians, how long does it take you to do this background check for this marijuana or liquor renewal? And likewise with other departments. So I would say at this point, we have not developed that.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and everything else I had were like in comparison to alcohol licenses, and it sounded like those were answered. So, okay. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Just some basic questions. So only alcohol and marijuana go through the clerk's office, but then all the other licensing goes through development services?
No, all business licenses go through the clerk's office, but if they are in city limits, brick and mortar or a home-based business, then there's land use approvals involved. And that's when community development and specifically planning and code enforcement review and make sure that the business is in compliance with what the land use requirements are. So to summarize that, only if they're in city limits, it starts to touch other departments. For a plumber who lives out in the county and who comes into work, when they apply, we just issue the license once we have what we need, because we can't regulate their property outside of city limits.
Okay. And so I guess, I know that we're sort of talking specifically about these 2 licensing issues, but generally, it looks like you mentioned 13 currently retail facilities. Has there been a lot of interest in, or perhaps maybe the question is, have they all been since 2014?
That's a really good question. So when retail marijuana started in 2014, the city, I'm speaking for another department, but community development developed very specific guidelines and standards as to where they can operate, particularly in the downtown area. And then statewide, they can't be close to parks, schools, items like that. So we have not, I think the last marijuana business we got, I think was in 2022. The applications came in, they've leveled off, a few of them closed. But I believe the main reason is because of land use requirements. It's very specific on where you can locate based on the shops that are already in town. I believe that also the medical marijuana businesses who were around prior to us allowing retail, they got first priority on applying for retail licenses or in addition to their medical license or converting their medical into retail, and then facilitating that corresponding land use. So in general, we have not had a whole lot of new applications. The newest one was Lovaco by Walmart, and that came in I think 22. And I don't believe it's currently because of our license fees. I think it's because Durango is pretty contained and land use really makes it a bit scarce to find a spot that would fit the requirements.
And those are state requirements, not local requirements.
The state has a few, like I think if I remember right, 1,000 feet from parks and schools and whatnot. But a lot of those land use requirements are Durango specific, to not have them all bunched together too close, or down, all that stuff. I can't really speak to a lot of that, but that's the general concept of it.
Jamie loves it when you're talking about her department.
So,
so I guess that would be also, well, I think my general question is more for Jamie. I remember that when we were talking about in another scenario, fees and services, that to open a new business, that the city fees were almost 30% of the cost of business. Do you have a general sense of how much, even perhaps in relation to these two businesses? I know that's such a big question. Maybe the question is 30% of all of the fees for opening a new business city fees?
I think it's going to vary depending on what they're doing. If it's a new construction, they're by far going to have more fees because then they have the major street impact fees, the plan investment fees. There's more impact, so there's more fees. If you're moving into an existing building, it will be far less. So it really depends on the situation.
I think that sort of sums it up, because I know there's been a lot of discussion in the community about the difficulty of development and how expensive it is to start a new business in Durango because of how excessive the city fees are. But perhaps that's everywhere where you're trying to start a new business, regardless of the industry, that city fees are just high. And so there's a lot that goes into that, I understand, but it was a general complaint that I've heard that city fees are too high in general. But just related to these two items, I'm really learning a lot about particularly the marijuana industry. It's something I just never been that familiar with. It seems to me that they should be in line with other business fees and perhaps not so isolated. Perhaps it's become quite mainstream. It's not like there's a flood of new industry. I don't know if they're mostly small businesses. I don't know if that matters or not when it comes to fees, but mostly small independent businesses here in Durango in general. So I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you, Mayor.
No, I'll go last.
Okay. The restrictions that are on marijuana location, are those the same restrictions for liquor? Are they similar? Are they very far apart?
I would have to look at the code. I know they are fairly similar, that they are uses that are restricted in location.
Okay. I guess I would wonder why we have 156 liquor licenses, but only 11 marijuana if it's a land use issue.
liquor licenses have varying categories where you have them associated with restaurants.
Correct.
It's not just a bar or a
Location.
liquor store. So
Got
it's going to vary by the use that's classified in our code.
Okay, great. And Ben, I've got a tangential question for you. The sales tax only license thing irritates the bejeebers out of me. So I have this right. If I'm an internet only business that I'm dragging cash out of our community to purchase services, I'm paying sales tax, but I don't have to pay any license fee. And my local business is supporting my schools and everybody else is paying a license fee. And we can't do anything about that.
No.
Okay.
No. I agree with you. Maybe for some of the big online businesses, I know a part of it is like just an online retailer who sells knickknacks to, to prevent them from needing to pay $55 for a license fee to make a $20 sale. We heard that a lot anecdotally over the phone, prior to 22. But I absolutely agree with the other end of it as well, like you're mentioning.
And if I am REI and I'm a consumer going to REI and I decide to buy it online, there's no difference in my sales tax in that purchase, correct?
I'm not in finance and I don't try to speak to sales tax a lot, but I think you're generally right. I believe it's 3.5%.
Okay, no matter what. Okay, thank you.
All right, I just have 2 points. The first one is, okay, so there's 14 hours to average to process a license. Okay, so since you've been there, 11 years, but the cost of labor has gone up in that time also, the cost of plant and materials. So we haven't had a cost of living increase to keep up with the cost to issue license. So that might be something to consider in the future. And then my last point is the fact that there's still some of us old timers who consider marijuana a gateway drug and the issues that come along with that, dependence, a lot of bad behavior. Is that considered into issuing license? It is a gateway drug.
I would say, I think it's naturally a community concern, but it's not spelled out in our liquor license marijuana code. And I'm not sure if it's spelled out in other areas of the Durango code, but inadvertent or negative community impacts, I think is a consideration. But I don't believe it's spelled out in our code. It was probably a bit more of a conversation between police and public safety and schools, maybe when this was coming together 11 years ago. So I think it's a concern, but it's not listed out in our code.
All righty, I just thought of one more issue. Okay, so are we still on a cash basis with the marijuana industry?
I don't know that answer. I could definitely check into that and follow up.
Because I know they were having problems with banking and, writing checks, which they can't.
I do know that sometimes when licensees submit their renewals, some of them issue us a check and others bring in bags of cash, and we coordinate with the finance office to have a secure kind of transaction there. But I don't know a thorough answer to that.
Okay, well, thank you. Any more questions?
Just next steps. I think Councilor Buell had suggested that we get some parity conversation, and I don't know what the next step necessarily was going to be. Okay, that's where you feel? Okay. I was just trying to make you talk. Okay.
If I may, as we look at going under new business, maybe for next year. And the reason I bring that to you is we've just done a budget to propose to you all. If we start making changes within the revenue systems and the fees, then that's going to make us have to go back and make some adjustments on the expenditures in the middle of a budget that we're trying to present to you all. So showing the other end of how far do we want to go in these fees is going to have a financial impact, which would require us to go back and cut expenditures out of our general fund to offset what those revenues might be. Any of all of those would require us to go back and redo some of our budget. Like fees are a big portion of how we make our revenue in our for our general fund department. So if we're going to do these things, the timing right now is going to drive to where we would have to redo our budget back for you, because then we're proposing based it possibly on a fee schedule that's different than what we've based our budget on this year.
Jose, then the mid-year readjustment or anything along those lines, can we not take this into account mid-year to 2026? We're going to take some months no matter what we do to get this through a process. So, but I don't feel like it's exactly fair to burden the marijuana businesses with our budget process, right?
Can I get a clarification real quick? Ben, when marijuana businesses renew their license, is it January 1 or is it dependent upon when they initially applied?
It's not calendar year, July 1 to June 30th of the following year.
So July 1 is when they would have to.
Sorry, it's for I can't the term off the top of my head. It's not calendar year. It's from whenever
fiscal
their
year.
license was issued.
I see. Okay. So when it was initially issued, it's a year
Yes.
of that fiscal calendar that they will go by.
Yeah.
So it could be January to December is when a renewal will take place.
Yeah, whenever we initially issued it, it's good for 365 days.
So that, it may burden some, but it may not burden all, or it may not burden any.
Yeah.
Depending on when they initially applied.
I would still say that it's not on the marijuana business to take care of the city budget. And if we've got a halfway point where we're already looking at expenses and adjusting for expenses, it makes sense to me that we could also hit that at that halfway point. We could adjust fees as well. I'm open to any.
Yeah. I think what I'm just putting out is, and I did not say it's on the marijuana business. And I want to make sure that was not a quote that I said in my part of it. What I am telling is that any reduction in our fees is going to have an impact on our proposed budget. So depending on what that is, could require staff to go back and have to redo a proposed budget for you if in case there's 11 businesses, I'm looking at $8,000, that's $88,000. If you drop it in half, that's $44,000. I got to go find that money in my expenditures to cut it, or I do not have a proposed budget. So my comment only is that it's not just as easy as just cutting the fee. There's a whole other side of it that I have to balance out that requires me then to go back and meet with all of our department heads. And our general fund departments already know that they just met with me a couple Fridays ago to cut 3% out of their budgets, and that was really painful. So it's that part of me just letting you know there's another side to this part, that it's not just as easy as like cutting. I've got to go find the other part of that money.
Yeah, I mean, I can appreciate that. I would just counterbalance that with the marijuana or whoever is paying higher fees is also under a budget crunch as well. So, somebody's going to take the hit if the fees go down. I just think we got to talk about parity more than we talk about, finding those revenue sources. So.
Any other thoughts? Yes.
So, Jose, didn't you just say that you were going to give a presentation on all of the licensing fees? You had a master plan going?
We're working on a master fee schedule, yes.
Was that any next year sometime? Do you have a?
I'm gonna look at Gloria because I just saw an email out and I don't know if Cheryl finished it yet.
Good evening. Yes, we are in the process of compiling our current fees into a master schedule. And then the process is to review and look at the fees across other organizations comparable, similar to what we're doing here tonight for these fees. So we're in the process right now of compiling that together. We don't have a master fee schedule for the city prior to that.
We don't have one currently.
Prior to this process, right?
Oh, okay. Okay. So, all right.
A great tool in budgeting and going, and as we look at fees and see if they are correct.
So there. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Alrighty, one last chance. Does anybody have any more questions for fees and license? All right. Next. Yeah, thank you.
Item on the agenda is proposed new agenda items for discussion.
Yes, Mayor and Council placed this on our study session agenda as an opportunity for the council to have a more detailed discussion regarding to new agenda items that you all may have, where you all are able to discuss the new agenda item amongst yourselves, staff can chime in if there's something portions on it that you might want to bring in. However, we can't take direction or anything on that, but it'd be a good precursor possibly for some of you all to be able to talk about some of the agenda items so that as it comes up on the regular agenda, it's not the first time you've heard it. It's not coming out of the blue. It might help us get a little more efficient when we look at some of those new agenda items. So something that we had talked about prior, just placed it on the study session agenda to see if this kind of helps with our process with this council of getting new agenda items on board.
Is your thought that this is where we would talk about like new items that we're going to put under new discussion?
Any that you're considering, anything that y'all are considering as a new agenda item would be an opportunity for you to discuss and gather input on.
In council, I really like this idea because I think one of the hardest things that we have is getting inclinations from folks on what's important, what they're addressing as individual council members. And so I think there's some requests or some goals from my side of the equation, at least, to try and have those kind of open discussions in a public meeting and to get an idea of what's important for the council members. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you got?
Well, I was waiting for somebody else, but okay.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's a couple of pieces that are of particular interest for me, and I hope as we head into the budget season that we're really talking about infrastructure and enforcement. I think if we're talking about two categories that I think we keep seeing community feedback on, it would be those two categories. And it feels to me like we've been talking about this off and on in our public meetings as well. But I didn't, on the enforcement side, I've got a particular interest in trying to do more around the bear issues that we've got going. We've got something on the agenda for this today's meeting as well. But looking at enforcement around the use of bear-proof trash cans, some of the other elements that are really going to start limiting the problems that we're having on a bad bear year like what we're having right now. Infrastructure-wise, I think we are talking, I'm particularly focused on Main Avenue at this point, but the downtown and the infrastructure issues that we've got going on have to start being addressed because they are going to be very expensive and they're going to be very time consuming. And so I guess I just wanted to open it up and see if other councilors have inclinations along those ways, any thoughts along those two kind of core areas for 2026 at least.
Thank you. So I think it relates to the issue that you mentioned, Counselor, like regarding the bears. I've heard other community members just talk about trash in general. And so one of the issues that came up very often regarding the bears is trash. And so could we have a study session or a briefing on currently our waste management plan and what we're doing regarding plastics and perhaps something along those lines. So it's a study session, I would think, from our waste management department that talks about sustainability, something along those lines. So without being able to dictate too much what the presentation looks like, there's been a lot of discussion in the community regarding, or at least I've heard from constituents talk about that issue. So again, not urgent, but a briefing on waste management and maybe it's related to bear-proof containers and that sort of thing.
For the waste management that you're hearing, is it like not recycling or what is it?
It's not exactly that people are not recycling, but the city is actually not just our city, but the recycling is not what it was originally intended to be, that plastics in fact are not being recycled, yet we often pay for that service. So something maybe related to how much of our waste management or our recycling is actually being recycled, and is there an alternative? And then that because of the composting, that it's attracting the bears or not composting.
I certainly have been hearing some on the bundling process that we've got at the recycling center and when we bundle multiple lines of recycling, what that means in regards to eventual recycling. If you're combining the plastics and the metals and all that stuff, is it actually getting divided out and recycled at the tail end of the thing? So I've heard some similar comments to what you're talking about on the recycling side. I haven't heard anything around compost with the bears.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, just a quick one. I know you were on council. I'm not sure if Dave and Gilda were, but we did have a presentation about these concerns, the recycling part. Marty went down to Albuquerque where we process our recycling, took a look at the process of the center, and found that it was, it was good. We know there were some parts that people had brought up some concerns about contaminated plastics, that some of it was being diverted, but we've gone down there personally to check it out, and that is not accurate. But we definitely can, if the council, the agenda wants to do another presentation on it, we definitely can do an education piece.
No, there's been a piece where you've had education and the two new counselors just weren't in the room at that time. So
sure,
we appreciate it when people come back, and I know staff has ended up repeating themselves a couple of times with me at least. So that's appreciated.
Did you want more in terms of the bear stuff than already that's on the agenda today? Sorry,
You are correct. So you'll see that the electric mats and the changing of that ordinance was a relatively low hanging fruit. No joke intended there. But I think enforcement issue and the fact that my exposure, at least in downtown, and the frustrations that I'm seeing from residents are that often people are overstuffing trash cans. Trash cans are not working, but our residents are not reporting it to the city. What are we doing with the large 320 gallon, the green cable locks? Many of the bears seem to be able to still get into those. And so I think there's a lot of deterrence options that we can take. There's a lot of mountain communities that are certainly in bear country and are dealing with this. And I'm not sure we're necessarily taking best practices from those. At the same time, again, talking about fees, I think we've got to put some teeth into our ordinances that are meaningful when somebody is not taking care of the trash and it's acting as a detractant multiple times, that they're starting to pay a financial penalty for that.
Okay. I mean, I don't disagree necessarily.
Sure. And if there's other areas that any counselor might want to address, or.
You do bring up one issue is with enforcement. We can't enforce everything. There's got to be community input with minding your garbage and like sticking it out the morning of garbage pickup.
Wait, say that again. Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Like people have to start minding their garbage a little bit better, like sticking it out the morning of the garbage pickup.
Yeah.
Because no matter how much enforcement we do, we've got to, it's the same with slowing people down with bikes. It's their behaviors that have to change. And we've already allowed a lot of behavior with our residents here to not mind some of the principles that we have established to have a great community to live on. One of them is going too fast on the trails. Those electric bikes really add to the dilemma, and then minding garbage.
I would argue that just like this last week, few weeks, we've had more enforcement with the e-bikes on the river trail, and I ride my e-bike down the river trail all the time, and like there was a bunch of teenage kids all down, and I have not seen them at all in the last couple of weeks. And so I think that if their enforcement kind of picks up, we do change those behaviors a little bit if there's repercussions for actions. But and so I think if there's a big enough problem like the bears this year, then we should have big enough consequences to change those behaviors, hopefully.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that council approaches it from a carrot, stick, and education approach, right? I mean, I think there's an element that most of the time that staff comes to us with a project that's going to impact the community. I think we do have those elements in there. How much of a benefit do they get? What's the negatives of negative actions? And then what's the education that we roll out ahead of time so that a community member that wants to help out does help out. And so I think that's going to be some of the interesting stuff that may come out of this discussion, is where do we find that balance between carrots, sticks, and education?
I think maybe before the next bear season, as we're winding up this one, hopefully we can maybe have a plan for education
Yeah,
and
I don't-
attack before the next one.
Yeah, I agree.
Argue.
I don't think either of these issues have to be mutually exclusive. Like, I think it'd be an amalgam of both. I mean, we can have, the personal cognizance of, just like, doing everything you're supposed to, but I think we can also have some better enforcement around how we are engaging with our wildlife and our trash. So
It seems to me when we have a resource officer, the ambassadors downtown, when we have a resource officer that's dedicated to trails, when we have somebody whose specific role is to really educate as much as provide that presence that says there is enforcement on this topic, that's when we make the most headway. And so, a bear resource officer that's a seasonal position that maybe is also a trails officer in the summer. This is now off the top of my head, so I don't have anything formal on this, but there's a piece where it seems to me that the more we specifically dedicate an officer on the enforcement side, I think we get more education as much as we get more enforcement out of that as well. Social media plays a big role in that as well. So there's a lot of different ways to attack some of these problems that I couldn't agree more with you, Mayor. I think these are behavioral issues. We got to try and move social pressure at the same time as we're doing enforcement and education to make some of these things that are quality of life issues better. Off-leash dogs would be another one that you could throw in this. Well, I've got others, but I'm going to save it because I don't want to be that guy. But it's appreciated that we're trying to figure out ways that council can have some open discussion and get a feel for, what is most important to council members, I think is the thing that I'm having a hard time as an isolated council member figuring out. And so any opportunities like this are appreciated, as are anytime we're having, one-on-one meetings, 2 counselors only, not 3 counselors, but 2 counselors just having a coffee and et cetera. So thank you.